Welcome, deep divers. Get ready, because we are about to embark on, well, quite an extraordinary journey, really, right into the foundations of the human mind.
That's right.
This is the Deep Dive, and today we're launching something special, a brand new seminar series as part of the Liar Superfun Learning Hour.
That's liar. Li-or-R.
Or exactly. And we're just incredibly excited to have you with us for this intellectual adventure.
It really is an adventure. We're aiming to shed light on one of the most profound concepts in psychology, but also maybe one of the most misunderstood, the unconscious mind.
Definitely misunderstood sometimes.
Yeah.
And for this first deep dive in the seminar, we're going straight to the source, right back to the beginning of this whole idea.
Yep, straight to Sigmund Freud.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our mission today, and really for this whole Liar Superfun Learning Hour seminar, is to really get a handle on what Freud himself meant when he talked about the unconscious.
So we're looking closely at 4 of his foundational papers.
4 key papers. And the goal here isn't, to immediately start comparing his ideas to what came later, or even jumping into critiques just yet.
Not yet.
No, right now, it's about diving deep into his original thoughts. What was he seeing? What problems was he trying to figure out? How did he actually, map out this hidden part of the mind?
Think of us as your guides, I guess. We're navigating these texts, and they can be dense, let's be honest.
Oh, yeah.
We're trying to cut through some of the noise, pull out the really important bits, and, well, give you a shortcut to being properly informed, maybe with a few surprising facts and hopefully enough humor to keep you listening.
So what really jumps out to you is we start unpacking all this. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's do it.
So maybe the first place to start is why? Why did Freud, who was trained as a neurologist, feel this intense need to even come up with something as abstract as the unconscious?
That's such a fundamental question.
Yeah, and our sources, they're really quite strong on this. They say it wasn't just like a theoretical whim. They call it necessary, legitimate, even essential for a comprehensive understanding of psychical processes. That's a big claim.
It's a massive claim, and it's absolutely core to everything that follows. The sources stress again and again that without this idea of the unconscious, psychoanalysis would just have this huge, unbridgeable gap. You couldn't really explain the mind properly.
An unbridgeable gap.
Wow. Think about it. So much of what Freud was observing, especially early on with his patients, things like hysterical symptoms, weird compulsive behaviors, they just wouldn't make any sense if you assumed everything in the mind was conscious.
Right. If we knew everything we were thinking and feeling, why would people act in ways that seem so irrational, even to themselves?
Exactly. The whole method of psychoanalysis, which is all about uncovering hidden meanings, it just falls apart without the unconscious as a starting point. It becomes, well, untenable.
So it wasn't just a handy idea, it was indispensable. It was the only way he could see to explain a whole bunch of things people actually did and experienced.
Precisely. It wasn't just abstract theory, it was driven by observation, by what he was seeing and hearing every day.
Okay, so what kind of observations are we talking about? What was so compelling?
Well, it comes directly from his clinical work and just observing human behavior. He found that lots of mental acts, personality traits, those little everyday mistakes, what he called Fehlleistungen or faulty actions.
Slips of the tongue, forgetting things?
Exactly, that stuff. And also, of course, the more serious pathological symptoms in neuroses and psychoses. None of it made sense if you only looked at the conscious mind. Think about dreams, too. The bizarre content of dreams or the symptoms of hysteria, they clearly contain material the person themselves had no conscious knowledge of. That pointed very strongly to some other source.
So the unconscious sort of fills in the blanks in our conscious experience. The sources mention gaps or lapses.
Yeah, like when you try to remember a name, it's right there on the tip of your tongue, and then poof, it's gone.
Ugh, happens all the time.
Right. And then hours later, maybe when you're thinking about something totally different, it just pops back into your head. It's like some part of your mind kept working on it, unconsciously.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
And this is where those Fehlleistungen and the faulty actions get really interesting. These everyday errors, the slips of the tongue, forgetting keys, misplacing something, making a silly mistake.
We all do them.
We all do them. And Freud was adamant. These are not just random accidents. He argued they are psychically determined.
Meaning
They're caused by unconscious motives that somehow override or replace what you consciously intended to do or say. A slip of the tongue might accidentally reveal a hidden wish or a thought you were trying to suppress.
Wow. So those little oops moments are actually windows. Direct evidence, Freud argued, observable evidence of unconscious processes interfering with, or maybe directing, our conscious actions. It shows something operating beneath the surface, shaping what we do without us realizing it.
Okay, that's fascinating. And maybe my favorite example, the one the sources really dig into, is verneinung negation.
Ah, yes. Negation. It's
Yeah.
brilliant and so counterintuitive.
Totally. So imagine a patient is talking, maybe responding to something the analyst said, or just having a thought, and they say something like, no, that's definitely not what I meant, or I wasn't thinking about my mother at all. It sounds like a simple denial.
It sounds like one. But what Freud found so insightful was that the very act of denying it, while consciously pushing the thought away, paradoxically proves that the thought was there, unconsciously.
Because why deny it if it wasn't there in the first place?
Exactly. He saw this as decisive proof that the analysis had successfully unearthed something unconscious. The denial confirms its presence even as it's being rejected. And here's the really wild part.
The unconscious itself, according to Freud, doesn't really contain the concept of no. It doesn't do negation or contradiction. It's all just, yes, affirmation.
Yeah. Wow.
So negation becomes this really unique, sophisticated way for unconscious content to actually reach conscious expression, but only if it's wrapped in this denial. It's like the unconscious insists on saying something, but the conscious mind can only handle it if it says, no, I'm not saying this.
That is genuinely mind-bending. The thought has to come out, but it needs this disguise of denial, like a mental trick.
It really is. And Freud connected this to something even more fundamental, how we develop the capacity for judgment itself.
Judgment, how does that link up?
Well, the sources explain that our ability to judge, to decide if something is real, or if a quality belongs to something, that basic function, it's actually rooted in really primitive early oral impulses.
Oral impulses, like babies.
Yeah, think about an infant's earliest experiences. The fundamental judgment is about what goes in the mouth. I want to eat this. Incorporating something good. I want to spit this out. Expelling something bad. So this implies a very early, almost physical, unconscious basis for how we start to test reality, how we make those first distinctions between inside and outside, good and bad, long before we have language or conscious reasoning.
So even our basic thinking tools have these deep unconscious roots.
That's the idea. It suggests our whole way of organizing reality starts down there, in the unconscious.
Okay, so pulling this together, it really seems the unconscious wasn't just a neat theory for Freud. What specific theoretical problems did it solve for him? Why was it so necessary for his whole model?
It was absolutely crucial for making his model coherent. He felt it established what he called psychical continuity. Without it, our conscious mental life looks fragmented, just a series of disconnected thoughts and actions.
Nice.
The unconscious provides the hidden links, the continuous causal chain, even if we can't see it directly. It helps explain why even normal mental life isn't always logical or predictable, why we do things without knowing why. And crucially, it's fundamental for understanding how his proposed mental systems, the unconscious, the preconscious, the conscious, actually interact. And most importantly, it underpins the whole concept of repression.
Which is itself an unconscious process.
Entirely unconscious, an active process keeping things out of awareness. So yeah, the unconscious really is the cornerstone holding the entire Freudian framework together. It makes sense of the sheer complexity of the mind.
Okay, so we've got a good sense of why Freud needed the unconscious. Now, how did he actually picture it? How did he map it out? This brings us to his famous topographical view.
Yeah, the map of the mind. It's a great way to think about it. But it's important to remember this isn't about brain geography.
Not physical locations.
No, it's a general schema, a conceptual model. He's dividing the mind into different psychical systems or provinces, each with its own way of working. It's a tool to explain all those things consciousness alone couldn't account for. It helps us visualize how different parts of the mind operate and relate to each other.
And this map has a kind of flow, right?
Yeah.
Mental stuff generally moves in one direction.
Typically, yes. The ideal path for psychic energy, for a thought, is from the deep unconscious system, the UKs, up into the preconscious system, the PCs, and then potentially from the PCs into the conscious system, the Cs. This sequence is really key to understanding how hidden thoughts try to surface or how they get blocked.
Let's start at the bottom then. The unconscious system, the UCOs. The sources describe it as huge, ancient, almost primal.
They really do. It's seen as the largest and most fundamental system, the oldest and most primitive. It's the original source of all our psychic energy, our drives, our basic wishes. And the crucial thing is it's fundamentally inaccessible to direct consciousness.
You can't just look into it?
Nope. Mental stuff in the UTAs cannot directly become conscious. It exists completely outside our awareness. Think of it less like a hidden room and more like the deep, deep ocean floor no light gets down there directly.
And it plays by totally different rules than our conscious mind, right? This primary process thing.
Completely different rules. It's governed entirely by the primary process, which is driven solely by the pleasure principle. Meaning its only goal is immediate discharge of psychic energy, immediate gratification. It wants satisfaction now, without waiting, without considering consequences or external reality. It's raw impulse.
Not just simple pleasure seeking, but a really fundamental mode of operating. And the sources list some weird characteristics of this primary process.
They're fascinating because they're so alien to how we normally think. First, it's timeless.
Timeless?
Yeah, processes in the yudangs aren't affected by time. Past, present, future, they can all mix together. An unconscious wish from childhood can feel just as urgent decades later. Time doesn't weaken things there.
Wow. Okay, what else?
Second, there's a lack of mutual contradiction. Opposing ideas or feelings can exist side by side in the yudangs without any conflict. You can love and hate the same thing simultaneously down there, no problem.
That completely breaks the rules of logic.
Totally. Third, it's basically indifferent to external reality. The UCase cares more about its own internal world, the psychical reality of wishes and fantasies, than the outside world. Its contents might be unknown, but they're real in their power to influence us.
And lastly, this free mobility of cathexis. Sounds like energy just bouncing around.
That's a good way to put it. Cathexis is the investment of psychic energy in an idea or object. In the UCase, this energy is super mobile, super fluid. It can jump easily from one idea to another.
And that explains things like displacement, shifting feelings onto something else.
Exactly. Displacement and also condensation, where multiple ideas get squished into one symbol, like in dreams. This mobility is key. And content-wise, the UCase operates mainly with thing presentations.
Thing presentations.
Sachvorstellungen. These are direct images, raw sensory impressions, motor feelings, their experiences before language.
So no words down there.
Essentially, no. Unconscious thoughts are nonverbal. They're tied directly to these raw object experiences, not to linguistic labels. That's why unconscious stuff can feel so strange or hard to articulate if it does surface it's speaking a different pre-verbal language.
Okay, so if the UCs is this wild, wordless, timeless zone just seeking instant gratification, how does any of that raw stuff get anywhere near our conscious, logical, language-based awareness? That must be where the preconscious system, the PCs, comes in.
Exactly right. The PCs is like the middleman. It sits between the UCs and the Cs, acting as a kind of mediator and censor.
Gatekeeper.
A gatekeeper, filter, yeah. Its main job is to sort of slow down and control that free-flowing energy from the UCs, and then regulate what gets passed upwards towards consciousness. And this is crucial. Stuff from the UCs cannot go directly to the Cs. It has to go through the PCs first.
No direct access.
None. The PCs decides what gets through and often in what form.
So what does the PCs work with compared to those raw thing presentations? This is where language becomes key, right?
Absolutely vital. The PCs operates with word presentations, Wortvorstellungen. This is the big difference. It links the raw images and sensations from the U6 to actual words.
Without that link.
Well, thought and communication get seriously messed up, which we see in things like schizophrenia. We'll get to that. But unlike the U6, the PCs is subject to reality testing, to logic, to time. It starts organizing things.
Okay.
And it creates what Freud called derivatives of unconscious impulses. These are like modified versions. If these derivatives can get past the censorship, they might become conscious, but often they're still distorted or disguised to make them acceptable. It's like translating a raw, shocking image into a coded message.
And then finally, the top layer. The conscious system, the Cs.
Yeah.
This is what we normally think of as our mind, our awareness.
Yep, the Cs is the system of perception and awareness. It's what receives information directly from the outside world through our senses, sight, sound, touch, etc. And it's the final destination for mental processes that actually become conscious.
How does something actually become conscious then?
Well, it's closely linked to the PCs. Typically, it involves that crucial step, linking the thing presentation coming up from the ULIX via the PCs with a word presentation in the PCs. And then it needs to receive what Freud called attention cathexis from the PC.
Attention cathexis.
Yeah.
Like focusing psychic energy on it.
Exactly. It's like shining a spotlight of conscious attention on that linked idea, bringing it into our immediate awareness so we can recognize it. Think about it.
Okay, so we've got the map, the wild ULIX, the mediating PCs, the aware Cs. But it's not just a static diagram, is it? It's all dynamic. How do these parts actually push and pull against each other? What are the forces involved? This gets us to the core dynamics and that huge concept, repression.
Absolutely. The unconscious isn't just a dusty old storage room. It's incredibly dynamic, always pushing, always striving. And the key dynamic, the process that really defines the boundary between the unconscious and the other systems, is repression, Verdrängung. And it's not a one-off event. It's an active, continuous process, a constant struggle.
So it's not like just forgetting something unpleasant once. It's an ongoing effort to actively keep it out, like a psychological bouncer constantly working the door.
That's a great analogy. The basic mechanism is the withdrawal of cathexis, pulling the psychic energy away from an unacceptable idea or memory within the pre-conscious systems. This strips the idea of the energy it needs to stay in awareness, pushing it down or keeping it out. That's the initial defensive move.
Okay.
But, and this is the really dynamic part to keep it repressed, the pre-conscious system has to constantly spend energy pushing back. This is called anti-cathexis or counter-cathexis.
So the mind isn't just pushing it down once, has to keep pushing actively all the time. That sounds exhausting, like a hidden energy drain.
It is. This anti-cathexis acts like a barrier, a sensor, using energy to hold that repressed idea down and prevent it from getting back up into awareness. And the amount of energy needed for this anti-cathexis is directly related to how hard the repressed idea is pushing from below.
Which tells us that unconscious stuff isn't just sitting there quietly. It's actively trying to get out.
Constantly striving for expression, pushing against that repressive barrier, this ongoing energy battle is really central to understanding things like neurotic symptoms.
And Freud broke repression down into two stages, right? It's not all the same.
Correct. First, there's primary oppression. This is the very first barrier. It's not about pushing something out of consciousness, but refusing an entry in the first place, denying an instinctual idea access from the start. This forms the original core of the unconscious.
The really deep stuff.
The really deep stuff. Then there's repression proper, Nachdrängen, or after pressure. This is the ongoing active process we usually think of. It constantly pushes away any related ideas, any associations, anything connected to that original repressed material. It's the maintenance work, keeping the lid on.
But even with all that effort, the lid doesn't always stay perfectly shut, does it? This return of the repressed idea seems key.
It's absolutely key. It shows that repression is never 100% successful. Unconscious content, driven by that pleasure principle seeking discharge, keeps trying to find a way out. And it often does, but in disguised or distorted forms.
Like symptoms or dreams or those slips of the tongue.
Exactly. Neurotic symptoms, dreams, parapraxis, they're all manifestations of this return of the repressed. It's this constant hidden battle between the repressive forces trying to keep things down and the repressed material pushing up from the yolks. It's like, trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
It's going to pop up somewhere eventually, probably unexpectedly.
With a splash.
Which brings us neatly to communication and censorship between these systems. Censorship sounds like the vigilant guard at the gate.
A very good way to think of it. The preconscious system acts as the main sensor, positioned right between the Ukis and the Cs. Its main job is to be a barrier or screen, stopping unacceptable, unconscious content stuff that would cause too much anxiety or conflict from just flooding into consciousness. It's a vital defense.
And there are kind of two checkpoints for this censorship.
The sources suggest that. But the main action, the really heavy lifting of repression, happens at the first checkpoint between the UCs and the PCs. That's where the anti-cathexis is working hard, opposing the raw, unconscious ideas.
Okay.
While Freud initially talked about a second censorship between PCs and Cs, the later thinking emphasizes that primary UCS-PCs boundary. But getting from PCs to Cs still involves some testing reality checks, getting that attention cathexis. So even pre-conscious thoughts get vetted before becoming fully conscious.
Which explains why, when unconscious stuff does sneak through, it often looks so weird or symbolic, it had to get disguised to pass the censor.
Precisely. Dreams, symptoms, slips, they're all distorted or disguised versions. This distortion is a compromise. It lets some unconscious impulse get partial expression, but in a form that avoids the full anxiety of the original raw content. It's the psyche's clever way of both revealing and concealing at the same time.
And this directly explains resistance in therapy, right?
Oh, absolutely. When a patient in analysis starts getting close to uncovering repressed material, they often hit a wall. They might forget things, change the subject, feel blocked.
It's not just them being difficult.
Not consciously, no. It's the resistance. It's a direct sign that the anti-cathexis, the censorship energy, is being mobilized to keep that repressed idea down. It shows both the pressure of the unconscious material trying to surface and the strength of the forces holding it back. It's the dynamic struggle happening right there.
Now, there's a really interesting twist here about how repression treats ideas versus feelings, the effects. Freud made a distinction.
Yes, this is a crucial piece of the puzzle. Repression primarily targets the idea, the thought, the mental representation of an instinct. It doesn't target the associated, affect the emotion, the feeling in the same way.
So the feeling can kind of get separated from the idea.
That's the key insight. An affect, being essentially a discharge of energy, a feeling state, can't really be unconscious in the same way an idea can. Effects, by their nature, tend towards discharge, towards being felt, towards consciousness.
So if you repress a disturbing thought, the feeling attached to it, say, anger or fear, doesn't just vanish. It could be left floating around, detached. That sounds like a recipe for free-floating anxiety.
It is. When the idea is repressed, the feeling that went with it isn't necessarily stopped from becoming conscious, but because it's now disconnected from its original source, it often gets transformed or attached to something else. It might be suppressed for a while, or come to light in some other guise, or, very commonly, it gets converted into anxiety.
So unconscious anxiety isn't a feeling we're unaware of, but anxiety whose source we're unaware of because the original idea is repressed.
Exactly that. It's an affect cut loose from its moorings. It manifests as a symptom, maybe that vague sense of dread or panic attacks, rather than a feeling clearly linked to a specific thought. Think of anxiety hysteria, like phobias. The original scary idea is repressed, but the fear energy gets liberated as anxiety. And then the PCs quickly binds that free-floating anxiety onto some substitute object, spiders, heights, whatever. The symptom is formed, the anxiety is felt, but the original cause stays hidden.
And this ties back to the UKEX always wanting to discharge energy.
Yes, effects are energy-seeping release. The UKEX pushes for discharge through action, motility, but the PCs usually inhibits that to maintain control. So when effects get separated from their ideas by repression, they can't find their normal outlet. Instead, they might discharge into symptoms, physical or psychological. The symptom becomes a partial, distorted energy release.
And that free mobility allows the feelings to jump onto new ideas easily.
Precisely. The fluid energy in the UKEX means effects can detach and reattach, leading to symptom formation through mechanisms like displacement. It really highlights the dynamic, energetic nature of the whole system.
Okay, so we have the why, the how, the map, and the dynamics, the forces. Now let's make it concrete. Where do we actually see the unconscious operating? What are its tangible manifestations?
Right. This is where the theory meets reality, where Fluid found his evidence. The sources point to several key areas where the unconscious makes itself known.
And number one, the big one, has to be dreams. The royal road, he called it.
Dreams are definitely highlighted as a primary and highly significant manifestation. They aren't just random noise. Freud saw them as distorted forms of unconscious wishes or thoughts that manage to slip past the censor, which is a bit more relaxed during sleep.
But they get distorted in the process.
Yes, the dream distortion itself is the work of the censorship. It's a necessary disguise to let the repressed stuff surface into awareness as the dream without causing too much anxiety and waking you up.
Which is why dream interpretation became so important to decode those disguises. The sources mention a specific example.
Yes, Freud would analyze dreams in detail. One example given is a dream about arranging flowers for a birthday. Seems harmless enough.
Pretty mundane.
Right. But through analysis exploring the associations, it might be revealed that this dream actually masked underlying repressed thoughts about something like degradation or prostitution, really potent unconscious conflicts. It shows how the dream work uses condensation, displacement, symbolism to compress and hide the real meaning. And often, one dream element is overdetermined. It stands for multiple unconscious ideas at once.
Okay. Beyond dreams, neurotic symptoms are another huge area where the unconscious shows itself, often painfully.
Hugely important. Symptoms are seen as compromise formations. They're the mind's distorted way of dealing with unresolved unconscious conflicts. Things like hysterical paralysis, obsessive rituals, phobias. They're viewed as indirect expressions of repressed wishes or ideas that can't get out directly.
And like we said, the feeling part might manifest as anxiety attached to something else, forming the symptom.
Exactly, like an anxiety hysteria. So the symptom isn't just suffering, it's also a kind of partial disguised gratification or release of pressure from the repressed material. It serves a hidden purpose.
And then back to the everyday stuff, those parapraxis, the slips and errors.
Fehlleistungen.
Yeah, Freud considered these incredibly important direct evidence. Slips of the tongue, forgetting names, Misplacing things, they aren't accidents. They're psychically determined by unconscious motives breaking through and messing with conscious intentions. A slip might reveal something you secretly think but didn't mean to say. Even memory errors, false memories, failure in earn. Not huge lies, but distortions show the unconscious influencing recall. They're tiny, everyday glimpses.
And resistance in therapy, that's the unconscious actively defending itself.
It's a direct manifestation, yes. When therapy gets close to sensitive unconscious material, the patient shows resistance. That block, that forgetting it's the anticathexis, the censorship, kicking in to protect the repression. It shows the unconscious pushing up and the defenses pushing back. For Freud, seeing resistance was proof positive of the dynamic unconscious at work.
Let's circle back to negation vernining, because it's just so clever. The unconscious finding a loophole. It's such a sophisticated mechanism. The patient says, no, I wasn't thinking that, or that's not what I meant, and Freud says, aha. The very denial allows a version of the repressed thought to reach consciousness, but only in this negated form.
It shows the power of repression. You still can't consciously own the thought, but it also bypasses it enough for intellectual acknowledgement.
Exactly. It kind of liberates the thought from full repression, allows judgment to operate on it intellectually, even if there's no emotional acceptance yet. It's an intellectual acceptance of the content of the repressed without canceling the repression itself. And this ties back to that basic function of judgment rooted in those early oral impulses of taking in or spitting out, deciding what's real or belongs. Even complex thought traces back to these primitive origins.
Finally, the sources talk about the most extreme cases like psychosis, schizophrenia. Here, it sounds like the whole system just kind of collapses.
Yeah. In severe illnesses like schizophrenia, the unconscious seems to break through in profoundly disorganized ways. The normal communication between euchus, PCs, and Cs breaks down. Freud talked about a massive withdrawal of object cathexes, pulling psychic energy away from the external world, from people and objects.
Where does that energy go?
It gets reinvested internally into the thing presentations in the UCs itself. So the person detaches from external reality, and their own internal unconscious content starts to feel like external reality. That's where you get things like hallucinations and delusions.
The inner world takes over. And their language breaks down too.
Dramatically. Because that crucial link between thing presentations and word presentations, the job of the PCs, gets disrupted. Speech becomes fragmented, nonsensical, because the ability to translate raw experience into shared language is damaged. It's like a regression back to the primitive nonverbal mode of the UCs. Words might even be treated as if they are the things they represent. It's a tragic illustration of the UCs operating unfiltered, unchecked by the organizing functions of the PCs and Cs.
It's worth just briefly mentioning the background here. Freud didn't just invent this whole system overnight, did he? It evolved.
Absolutely. It was a long intellectual journey. His early work, like the Project for a Scientific Psychology back in 1895, was very neurological. He was trying to explain the mind in terms of brain physiology.
Because he was a neurologist.
Exactly. But working with patients, especially those with hysteria, he found the purely physical explanations just didn't cut it. They couldn't explain the complex, symbolic nature of the symptoms. So he made this huge shift, moving from a neurological view to a purely psychological one. He started thinking about a psychical apparatus with these interacting systems, UQs, PCCs, with the unconscious as the driving force. That shift from brain locations to mental systems was really the birth of psychoanalysis.
And he had influences people he was reading or reacting to.
Oh, definitely. He wasn't in a vacuum. People like Ewald Hering, who wrote about memory and unconscious mental processes, were certainly influences. And philosophically, while he acknowledged ideas like psychophysical parallelism, mind and brain run parallel, he always insisted the psychic realm was distinct. Mental events weren't just brain states. They corresponded to them but had their own properties, their own dynamics, that needed a psychological explanation, not just a biological one. Understanding that context helps see just how revolutionary his ideas were.
So after this first deep dive, what's the big picture? We've explored Freud's original idea of the unconscious, how dynamic it is, its weird rules like timelessness and primary process, the key roles of repression and censorship.
Yeah, and we've seen how it pops up everywhere in dreams, symptoms, slips of the tongue, even severe illness.
And the key thing is you can't see the unconscious directly.
Nope. Its existence is inferred. It's a necessary inference, Freud argued, proven by the consistent patterns in all these manifestations, even the baffling ones. And it's not passive storage, it's active, always striving, always influencing us in ways we often don't realize. always pushing against the forces, trying to keep it hidden.
This foundational understanding of Freud's view is really just kicking off our Liar Super Fun Learning Hour seminar. Next time, we'll build on this. Maybe we'll start looking at how later thinkers took these ideas and ran with them or challenged them.
Yeah, there's plenty more to explore.
And just to leave you with something to chew on, we talked about negation, how Freud suggested that saying this is not what I meant might actually be the deepest way of acknowledging an unconscious truth, at least intellectually.
Right.
So what does that imply for how you listen to yourself, how you interpret your own denials, those moments you insist no, or those little mistakes you brush off? Could they be saying more than you think?
Something to ponder.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope you're as excited as we are to continue this journey into the depths of the mind.